Good morning, everybody. I am an early riser, so I thought that I would show you what it's like in my garden at 4:30 in the morning. I'm trying to talk quietly because the bedroom window upstairs is open and there are neighbours around, and it is dead quiet except for this. Can you hear all the birds? It is extremely loud with birds, but there's no traffic. I can hear a hint of traffic down the motorway a little while, further away from here, but it's so quiet you can hear the motorway. All the traffic on it. And yeah, it might be 4:30 in the morning. Oh, look, there it is. The first car. Or is it a bus? But this is just such a perfect time of the day. A wonderful time to... Oh, listen to that. Okay, I'm just going to be quiet for a few minutes. We have this many birds, I think, because there's a rowan tree there. Further back there are a whole bunch of lilac trees. There's a birch tree in the corner there between the two big ones. That's a eucalyptus. And then there's loads of privet. And the privet on that side, on the neighbour at the back, because the neighbours kind of cross over like bricks, and the one where the hedge is standing up taller is the other neighbour at the back, and their privet is kind of left naturalised on the other side, so it's a nice privacy screen for us anyway, so we don't say anything, but the other neighbours have cut their side of the hedge to match ours. So it lets in more light on that side, which is nice because that is the southern aspect. So I'm facing south right now. I'm going to be eaten by midges by the time I get back in. It's been lovely over the past few days to watch the birds in the morning, because the garden by between 5 and 6 gets absolutely full of house sparrows, blackbirds, and then later on in the day even the magpies are everywhere in here, and they've been coming up to the pond, and they've been coming right there where those little rocks, the rock ladder was put for frogs, and the frogs haven't been using it, obviously, but the birds have to get to the water and drink the water. So I'm very pleased with that, to see the birds drinking water. It's getting lighter by the moment. The sun comes, daylight arrives very early in the summer time in the UK, and it's light for very long during the day, and sometimes it's like this till at 10 o'clock at night. So I love the very long days of summer, because then I do get to sit in the garden at this time in the morning, close my eyes and pretend it's the middle of the day. Okay, except for the lovely warm sunshine. But you don't hear all the traffic. You pretend in my mind that I'm somewhere in the countryside. You know, considering there are that many lilac trees, there's one over there, and our neighbours right over that way, I think 1, 2, 3, 4 houses down, between the third and fourth house, there's a whole hedge of lilac. And there's another white lilac there, and the other neighbour in the third house down. You'd think with all that lilac there'd be a great deal more perfume wafting across this way, because the wind doesn't usually come from either that easterly direction or northwesterly from the front. So you'd think we'd get more perfume. Well, anyway, as I said in the last video that I made, that I needed to think which direction I'm going in. It's been very difficult to find a quiet time to sit and contemplate and write down and put my thoughts on paper to put it in order, because that's what I have to do. My thoughts I have to write down, and then I get them in order in my head, and then I can form a plan in my head. I'm kind of like that. Even with the garden, when I knew I had to change it, I had to draw a plan. And I had to draw pictures and measurements and put in my head a list. So I wrote down 4 sides of an A4 sheet of paper, all the plants I wanted, and it was literally crammed full. And I have some of them in here, but not everything, and I intend to cram everything in. Okay, so that's as far as just the way my head works with planning things out. But it gets a bit boring for me to have to just record the same thing over. I mean, this is a tiny garden, really. I mean, massive compared to a lot of our neighbours and a lot of other people in suburbs. Most people have nothing more than this little porch we have here under the veranda. This is all most people have. A little tiny courtyard. Not even that, what they usually call it postage stamp gardens here in the UK. But so we do have a massive garden because we have all of this and the front garden. So I count myself very, very fortunate indeed. But it is small. It's not much acreage as far as, my dreams were. I started out many years ago when my daughter was little. I mean, that's 24 years ago, because that's how long ago it was that I started to get this yearning inside of me for planting. I wanted to grow things. And I didn't have a clue. The only thing I had was the memory of my mum gardening when I was a child. Hang on. Microphone. I need a microphone because I'm having to talk so quietly. And I got, between this video and the last, I could tell the difference because I didn't have the microphone with the last video. But anyway, I can remember my mum gardening, and she had a pumpkin patch and grew the most wonderful Hubbard squash. And I remember I always thought her garden looked not like the traditional British vegetable garden in straight rows and very full of annuals, and it was definitely not a permaculture garden. But my mum's looked a little bit messy, as I thought and understood it as a child. But looking back, it was actually very good permaculture principles. It looked like there was a lot of chop and drop now as I think about it. So I think my mum's example of growing things is the first example I had. In one house she lived in, it was a rented house, had a very old passion fruit vine, and I remember that being in fruit as well. My mum's stepdad also was a very good gardener. He had a very, very big garden. I mean, his vegetable patch alone was as big as this entire garden in the back. And he had a mini orchard. I said. There was quite a few trees in it, between peaches and pears and apples. And then we had a whole row of prickly pears along the back wall. And we had this giant loquat tree. Oh, I loved that loquat tree, and we used to climb in it as children. Crazy, because come to think of it, it was actually a huge tree. I remember my dad climbing the tree and falling out and injuring his knee. It was a big tree, but we loved climbing it. A loquat tree, and it's difficult to get loquat in this country. I have had it twice from Sainsbury's, but it's very rare. I wish we could grow loquats in this country. It would be lovely. One of my favourite fruits. But he had that vegetable garden. Then down the side of the house he had some very pretty borders leading to a tree in the corner of the front garden. And the entire front garden were lots of rose beds dotted all over the place. The lawn was basically paths between all the rose beds. And there were borders, and on the one side along the driveway there was another border full of different lilies, especially arum lilies. So he was a very keen gardener, and I loved his garden. So I think that's, between my mum and my mum's stepdad, I think I had a good idea of garden. Remember my dad's mum had a garden as well. And that was a bit more of a naturalistic bunch of borders and curved bits around a lawn, where us children used to play rugby with quite a few brothers and stepbrothers and a stepsister. We had quite a good little team. So with friends we used to play rugby on the lawn. But that was, I think that's where my influence a lot comes from, gardening. And then I lived on a farm with my dad's uncle and my brothers and my uncles. My great uncles was my dad's cousin, actually. My dad's cousin, so my great uncle. Or second cousin. That's it, second cousin, something like that. I don't understand all of these terminologies. It gets a bit confusing. But we lived on their farm with them for a little while. And I remember the animals. I remember the trees, and there used to be groves of rhododendron trees where us children used to play. And we used to play under the trees. And the way that the rhododendrons grew, it made magical areas like caves. And we used to have, and as children used to play and have secret passwords as we played and romped underneath these grove trees. And you had to have the password to come in. It was just magical. It was a wonderful experience. And there was a man-made concrete canal, not a very big one, more like a big watering trench, but we used to swim in it as children when the water was in there. And the concrete on the sides were covered in algae, so we'd get green bottom sliding down the sides of the canal into the water. So it was a magical time to play in this, if surrounded by nature. And there were trees absolutely everywhere. And we'd walk through the fields and drive in the pickup truck along the road on the side of the field. And I remember one day the middle one of my brothers jumping out the back of the pickup truck and jumping to catch a guinea fowl, and he actually did. As an adult now, the thought is absolutely insane that a child would jump out of a moving pickup truck and catch a guinea fowl. It just is insane. But yes, thankfully over here it would not be legal to have your children sitting in the back of a pickup truck. Every child has to be strapped into some kind of car seat or booster seat under a seat belt. So the thought of that, what could have happened, was insane. But those are the magical memories of childhood, surrounded by nature. And some of the farmhands at the bottom of the farm had what I could only call now, as I understand it and my studies of permaculture, was a natural building. They built it out of cob and brick, and the floor inside was made out of rammed earth. Maybe the walls even were rammed earth, I don't know. But the floors to me were magical because it was weird. I never understood how it didn't smell, because what it was covered with after it was built, and I think it was rammed earth, but it was covered in I don't know what to call it. I suppose you could call it a render, but it doesn't go on the wall, it goes on the floor. And it was a dark colour, and I never understood why, because it was made out of cow muck. They used the cow dung to make the covering on this floor, and it felt a bit like a flock covering, you know, the flock wallpaper that you get, that velvety kind of feeling. Well, that's what the floor felt like. So it helped to keep the floor warm in the winter, but it was easily cleaned. And I was always fascinated by this, because we used to play with the children, with the farmhands' children. We used to hang around with them and the workers. So we had a lot of contact with nature around us and all the plants. I remember these, and I remember how going with the farmhands when they were milking the cows or feeding the pigs, you know, and tending the birds. It was one of those memories, I think, that I didn't ever think of, but has had a profound effect on the direction of my life. Because deep inside me, there's always been a longing for nature. So I think that's where I'm coming from. And for now, with this video, I think that's all I want to do, is just think about where my love of nature and my desire and longing for it comes from. That might help me to put my thoughts, you know, in a gearing up mood way, so that I could think about where I want to go, where I am. So that's where it is, my love and desire for nature, where it must come from. I suppose it comes from much further back than that, but it's the childhood memories that form part of us, isn't it? And I just think I need to think about that and explore that. So from now, after this video, I'm going to be thinking a bit more about how that has influenced me and where it has brought me to. And next time I might explore when I'm talking to you, if I'm not just doing a tour, what that has brought me to where I am now. And then I'll explore where I'm going and what I need to be doing, and formulate plans in my head to make a direction. So I hope this wasn't too boring. I did say that these videos are helping me to record progress and growth. And I think that a garden is not just a garden and not just a growth of a plan of a garden. It's an extension of the person creating it and those who enjoy it and live around us, because I try to create, and some of my motivation for this stuff comes from a love of my family and a desire to provide a little haven for them and anybody who comes to my home. So I think that a garden is far more than just a place to grow plants or grow food. It is something far more, and I think I'm going to keep that in mind. So the day has started, the morning has obviously woken up the day, and I need to get done with stuff inside. So for now, I hope you all have a lovely day and a moment to reflect and to ponder. And these things I am going to ponder on myself. Have a lovely day, everybody. Bye.